Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Monday. I'm the Great Strega, and I'm here to give you your daily collective read for today, Monday, May 6th, 2024. What do we have coming through in the cards for today? May I please have the first 5 cards in our 5-card spread? First card we are starting our day off with today is the Chariot in its reversal. Why is the Chariot in its reversal? Masculine and feminine energy in the heart of the divine union frequency. One of the things that we saw was occurring, and I need to stress this right now because this is why this card is actually a positive card, even in its reverse position right now. Why? Because we see that, as I mentioned, what is happening for a lot of the energy in the heart of the divine union frequency right now, navigating spaces and places that may have typically created that sense of the energetic trigger, right? This is energy right now that is doing a lot of that work, facing fears, doing the hard part first, unpacking trauma, opening old wounds, addressing things in ways you haven't addressed them for. That's tough stuff. That is some AP level work right there to a certain extent, specifically because, and we even saw that for a lot of the energy in the heart of the divine union frequency right now, navigating spaces and places that you aren't typically able to go or may have felt like they were boundaries in the past. That's that moment that you're not necessarily sure what to energetically expect. Right? That's that big question mark. What happens when you break out of an energetic cycle? There's a little bit of a wait and see that effectively occurs around circumstances and situations. Now, for masculine and feminine energy doing this, we even saw that level and degree of concern, compassion, care, navigating forward in that way of being energetically mindful, not just of the self, but of the other. That amplification is being expressed. How? Energetic slowness. What happens if you're navigating something that typically engenders a reactivity point in you? What is the success metric? The success metric is a lack of energetic movement, right? That's almost showing that validation point. It's showing that path work being energetically successful, because this is not energy that is feeling like navigating those spaces to look or to seek an energetic reaction, but more that ability not to is the path work of evidential purpose right now. So for masculine and feminine energy, even if something isn't moving as energetically quickly as you would aspire and desire right now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because these energies right now are working through reactivity points, and the success metric against a reactivity point is not letting or allowing something to energetically trigger you. While for masculine and feminine energy right now that's coming into the divine union frequency, what did we see that was happening? That act, that necessary requirement right now for a lot of the energy coming into divine union is, and this is like that layer cake effect, not only are you carrying the wounds of another, right? You're holding forth on the wounds of another. A lot of these energies are seeing them coming into those points of intimacy to such an extent that you're learning about one's vulnerabilities. You're seeing a lot of that work. What often happens when we do that work in seeing one another's vulnerabilities? We almost have that point of seeing something in a way that someone else doesn't. Right? We can always see them in a different way. And we see even now a lot of these energies coming into that point of observation almost feels like that amplification of seeing someone holding an energetic wound that isn't necessarily their own always brings in that desire to want to energetically heal it. Right? And that's the difference of wanting to change someone, right? Wanting to adjust someone versus seeing something that someone is carrying that feels like it creates pain for them, and that desire and need to want to mollify and heal it. But what are these energies doing right now? Are they going forward and doing that? No, they're not. They're being conscientious in terms of how another is asking something to be carried. And that ability of energetically carrying something in the way that someone is articulating that they would like it to be carried, it feels a little bit like a hurdle, right? It feels like a little bit of a limitation point, because there's that need and desire to want to facilitate forward in something. But that mindfulness of not doing so is the articulation between doing something that feels good for oneself versus being energetically mindful of how another chooses to approach or navigate something. So we see even now with that energy coming into divine union right now, and the energy at the heart of it, a little bit of different work, but all for the same reason and purpose. While for masculine and feminine energy right now that is in separation, a lot of this is that energetic slowness. It is that moment of taking a lot of this wait and see approach. The last reading that we did, we saw that there was a lot of new energetic connections that are forming during this time. And a lot of this energetic connection, there's a lot of mindfulness, a lot of energy moving towards each other from a place of deep, deep authenticity and vulnerability. Why? Because these energies coming into new partnership, they're coming out of cycles where they're taking some very deep, profound energetic lessons. For masculine, that lesson is wanting to build forth with feminine from a place of authenticity, because how can you manifest what you desire if you're not manifesting in an authentic way with an energy that wants the same things that you are desiring to manifest? So we see right now that's hard work for masculine, because coming into that layer or level of intimacy, being that open to feminine, even as you're building a new energetic connection, it almost feels like you're taking your armor off. You're like taking your armor off at a time that you feel energetically that you want to put it on. While for feminine, that ability of discernment, utilizing a lot of this path work for discernment for feminine right now, is the feminine looking and seeking and looking for the masculine that's able to articulate in this way, recognizing, even the feminine recognizing how vulnerable it takes or requires to be able to do that. That is the feminine energy that almost says to the masculine, as long as I see like the smallest ability to do so, even that in its smallest degree is enough to allow for the possibility, because that's the feminine that almost sees the masculine that's like working on that ability to assess, that ability to look inwards. Even a lot of this energy building new energetic connections by observing the past and almost building an energetic bridge in the present by describing what has occurred in the past path work and articulating the difference between what effectively they experienced versus what has changed within them. That ability to like sift through, that is what is allowing for this breakthrough. And for feminine, that observational point, looking towards masculine and almost again, feeling that sense of having experienced the same thing, but looking and observing and seeing if you are someone experienced it the same way as you. All of this is what is allowing for this path work of determination. And we do see, even in separation right now, there is a little bit of that wait and see. There is a little bit of that stop and start. But we see that even that hesitancy is one that there's so much of that sensitivity that is occurring here that is almost requiring that point of fastidiousness. Second card in our 5-card spread for today is Emperor. This card may look familiar. I believe we ended last week, or if this card was not, this card was in its reversal at our last reading. It might have even been the final card that we drew. So I'm not surprised to see it popping back up, but here we go. Now it's in its upright. Why? Because that is that moment. What is the feminine looking for right now from masculine energy and separation? This is not feminine energy and separation that's looking for masculine to come towards them and say, I don't know what happened. I've always been energetically perfect, and I just had a lot of bad stuff happening around me all the time. Like if feminine sees that from masculine, feminine's like, that's interesting. No, this is feminine energy in separation that's looking for the masculine energy that can take accountability on what hasn't occurred that was positive. This is feminine energy that looks for a masculine that is able to articulate on what didn't energetically work in the past. And feminine is also being very observant as to whether that's masculine energy approaching feminine and saying, I've always been energetically perfect and all of this bad stuff just kept happening to me. That's almost like the feminine energy being like, that doesn't sound right, because that's not necessarily energetically healing. Rather, this is almost the feminine that's seeking that masculine energy that can recognize their own limitations, that can articulate upon what didn't work. This is almost the feminine energy that finds it even more strong for a masculine that's able to really, really, really identify and focus what is broken. This is like the plumber effect. Be like, no, this is exactly what was broken here. And I had a bit of fault here. This is what happened. Like that's that a masculine's own ability to articulate and amplify on that. the ability of the masculine almost to go into specific detail in explaining and expressing what went wrong energetically in the past. That is what feminine is seeking right now in relationality to feeling that hope and aspiration and building forward with fem masculine right now. And that's why I see here, that's why we see for even a lot of the energy of the feminine right now, that's when the negative becomes the positive, because this could be a masculine that's being very authentic to feminine and telling the feminine their weaknesses, their failure points, and masculine being like, you probably don't think a great deal about me. And feminine's like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? That's amazing. Your ability to do that, your ability to assess. I told you, as long as it's there in the smallest fraction, the possibilities are endless, because that's a feminine that doesn't feel like that's a masculine leading from the ego. That's a masculine that's learned that the true strength comes from being able to put the ego aside and to see things as they truly are. Masculine energy going towards feminine right now. You may also be feeling like that moment. And again, if you're in those moments where you're talking to feminine and you're telling them, you're articulating, you're expressing, you're explaining, all of that openness, even at that moment that makes you feel energetically low for a minute, you may be experiencing feminine that's like, I think it's really great that you're able to see that. I think it's really important that you're able to identify that. This could be that shocking moment for a lot of the masculine of almost identifying and recognizing those moments that when you tell feminine, even something that you may hold or consider an energetic failure point, it creates that point of the feminine saying, I appreciate you even more for being able to authentically express that and to see that within one's own self. You may even be feeling, in a way, getting some clarity from the feminine in that way, because this could almost be a masculine. If this is a masculine that may have taken on too much of that energetic burden, what's the feminine doing here? I don't think that doesn't sound like all of that was energetically your fault, right? This is the energy I told you, doing that work of parsing through between what feels like this is where we start acting as clear mirrors for one another, in terms of what we feel like we're holding responsibility for versus what we can change from within versus what we experience from without. So look, what is happening right now for a lot of the new energetic connections that are forming? Doing that coursework, doing that parsing out of figuring out what was the self change versus what is outside the self. Masculine and feminine energy coming into divine union right now. This is that energetic equivalent of experiencing and finding parts of the other that one cannot see. Right? This is like, how can you look at your own back? You can't. These energies right now, working through those moments or those modalities where you're building into the heart of divine union, you're starting to see those parts of the other that you don't typically see. But what are these energies doing in this way? Are they taking that energetically and running with it? No. They're almost being energetically mindful of it. They're navigating those spaces and identifying and recognizing the sensitivity that often those spaces and places of intimacy speak towards us. Sometimes our moments of intimacy, the things we don't know about ourselves, they reveal more in those moments. And those can be the most beautiful because we can't see them within our own self. That's almost where a lot of the love that others carry for us is held. Not even those moments, that's where the ego fails. It's those moments that we don't even recognize, where again, even our own ego slips to a certain extent. And someone sees something within us that we might not necessarily be aware of. So we see even now that for a lot of that energy, the ability to hold that, it almost feels like that act of energetic preciousness. For feminine, this could be energetically holding parts of the masculine and navigating them with a bit of gentleness, because again, you don't want to interrupt or wound the energetic ego of the masculine. I don't mean that in a belittling way, but I mean that in a way that you almost see those parts of masculine that they put up extra armor around, because you realize that they're carrying some energetic wounds there. For masculine, these are those moments that you may be feeling like you're holding for feminine that may feel more frustrating, because it may make you feel even more protective, because you're not even necessarily energetic. You're potentially seeing parts of feminine that they carry within their own selves that don't necessarily feel like something that's carried within them so much as they're externally having to experience or navigate. What are these energies doing right now in the heart coming into divine union? They're guarding those spots. They're guarding those spaces. Feminine, holding that part of the masculine's own intimacy or their own insecurities in a way with that delicacy, all to be able to kind of energetically protect the masculine. While for masculine, being able to like productively protect the energy of the feminine from those spaces or places that they consider their internal failure points, but masculine feels are really those external objectification points that made the feminine doubt themselves. These are both of these energies that are effectively building into that sense of energetic resilience and from a very, very protective quality. Masculine and feminine energy right now in the heart of the divine union, a lot of this energetic resilience, if you will, has to do specifically with the fact that, again, a lot of this energy in the heart of the divine union is moving, like crossing some thresholds in relationality to something you've experienced before that you've never really gone further than, right? Like what happens in those moments that you're navigating and you see and experience something that has always been a limitation point to you. It's like you're reaching like the edge of a map, right? So we see to a certain extent, that is why we see that there's that level of like energetic resiliency that's occurring in those spaces and places right now, because that is that energetic equivalent of doing something that you haven't done before. And you have a little bit of that question mark in terms of how to do it, but you're expressing that sense of intention. Like, what do we do that guides us forward in those moments that we don't know what the energetic outcome is? We let the intentionality of purpose guide us forward. So that's what we see that a lot of the energy in the heart of the divine union frequency is doing right now. Third card in our 5-card spread for today is, that's that moment that almost allows for that feeling of energetic surrender. And I don't mean energetic surrender like giving up. I mean that moment of kind of just like, like that's that silk to steel approach. You know what I mean? Like that's that moment. You don't push against that feeling of inevitability. You don't push against that feeling of energetic uncertainty. You just accept that. You just accept the situation for what it is, right? And so that moment of almost like not building resilience, I told you, especially if these are situations or circumstances wherein you're having difficult conversations, you're navigating spaces and places that typically trigger you, you're working through something here or pushing beyond one's own energetic limitations, potentially in around spaces and places where you may carry, insecurities, things that feel like they're blocking you from your energetic blessings. There's that moment that the non-reactivity to something getting energetically easier is something that doesn't create a reactivity point. Doesn't create that moment that you energetically lock up. It's like that moment that, like, again, I told you, a lot of this energy, it's like the equivalent of trying to touch a sensitive spot and being like, does it hurt when I do this? And someone's like, ow, yes. Well, how about this? How about this? No, I mean, you keep touching it, doesn't hurt anymore, right? It's almost that moment that we almost see to a certain extent that a lot of the energy right now is navigating that, either, again, in a tangible way or in very metaphysical ways right now. Something that feels like it is getting energetically easier, but that sense of conscientiousness, that sense of energetic compassion, that feeling of, again, the counterpart and saying, well, I typically can't talk about these things. I typically wouldn't move forward in this way, but not because of you, right? Not because of you, with you, but energetically beside me, with that energetic support, these energies doing that in tandem. That is that moment that almost feels like that amplification of possibility, because that's that moment of saying, I know someone else can't energetically do that for me. But having that sense of energetic security of seeing someone that's doing it energetically with me is all one needs to be able to feel that sense of security as you push forward in that way. While for masculine and feminine energy right now, the opposite is still true. We keep going back and forth between that opposite moment and that non-opposite moment. Because for masculine and feminine energy coming into divine union right now, this is not a moment where you're doing something in the way that you might aspire and desire. You're carrying someone else's wound. You're holding something for another person. You're holding it the way they're asking you to energetically hold it. You may even see something there that you feel like you might be able to facilitate that makes something easier going forward. But again, these are not energies that are in union with each other for the sake of energetically changing one another. This is something that feels aspirational, but doesn't feel necessary. It doesn't feel fundamental. The desire to heal someone, the desire to take a pain off of another person. And this is the difference between energetically changing someone versus wanting to help someone heal, right? That's the difference between seeing something and being like, it would be a lot better if you were like this, right? That's more of that ego trying to change another person versus seeing someone and saying, I see that you carry something that hurts you. I see that you're holding something that causes you pain. I want to be able to ease that pain. I want to be able to ease that burden. So even here we see that that aspiration is one that the energy is holding space for, but they're not necessarily actively moving upon, because that is that moment of energetic resilience between seeing something in another that you hope you can help them heal versus seeing something in another that you wish to energetically change. Masculine and feminine energy that is in separation right now. A lot of this energy is doing that in separation. A lot of this energy is parsing through the difference energetically, potentially even new energetic connections between the vital difference. I'm going to say it again. Between seeing something that someone is energetically holding that hurts and wanting to help them heal. That may have been created from spaces and places where someone wanted to change someone for the sake of their own energetic benefit, right? One is something that you do to be able to facilitate energetic healing. The other is experiencing a wound when someone feels like they're trying to energetically heal you and almost articulating, I'm doing this for your own good, right? So we see even now that a lot of that energetic pathwork in separation may either be energies that are meeting and healing and understanding the difference in those modalities, or these are energies that are coming into a place of healing by articulating the difference between those and potentially identifying the difference in prioritization as it relates to that sense of compassion and care. Fourth card in our 5-card spread for today is, oh, there it is. Doesn't want to stay in the deck. We've got here our 5 of Pentacles, those abandonment wounds coming out. What's happening right now for the energy and separation? Getting a lot easier to talk about something, isn't it? Still hurts, but it's getting a lot easier to talk about something, isn't it? Because what we see here is, again, I told you, a lot of this energy in that path work, in that work during the eclipse cycle. What happened with that eclipse come down in relationality to the Scorpionic full moon, in relationality to the Mercury retrograde? Being able to look at something with a new perspective doesn't make it hurt less, but it's easier, right? For masculine and feminine. Feminine being able to release that energetic bitterness around something helps identify the source of the energetic wound, because you're not letting your judgment be clouded by the feeling. You're almost able to look at something with a higher degree of energetic logic. While for masculine, not letting yourself be clouded by the grief of regret, but almost letting that be that pathwork of purpose. It's not that it hurts less. It just makes it a lot energetically easier, because now it's facilitating the ability to move forward by identifying what didn't energetically work in the past. And that's either allowing for a pathwork of restoration around situations with the express indication that there's something about a changing of priorities and accountability, not just going back to something the way it was left, as well as new energetic connections that are doing this work in terms of identifying what didn't work in the past that you're resolving to make right in the present. Masculine and feminine energy right now coming into divine union. This is the energy that's learning about each other's abandonment wounds. The difference here is that they're already starting to feel like they're healing them, because these are not energies that feel like they have to hide these things. What happens in the moment that instead of just what happens in the moment instead of just projecting? What happens in those moments instead of just projecting our wounds onto others? What happens in those moments of taking it personally when someone shows us that they have a sensitivity? What happens when we come into that moment or space or place of utilizing our emotions as like a weapon instead of a bridge? Those are those moments. These are energies that are holding space and holding compassion for one another, observing and articulating upon what created those wounds, not subjecting each other to those wounds. And that ability of feeling and seeing that is already creating enough energetic security for these energies to consider the day or possibility of being able to heal what may have felt like it was unhealable in the past. While for masculine and feminine energy right now, in the divine union frequency, you're doing it. You're doing it right now. It can be frustrating. It can be triggering, right? It can be those moments that feel like the amplification of anxiety and doubts and fears. But what are these energies doing right now that is helping to facilitate that work? This is not energy that feels like they're doing that for the sake of the other. This is not energy that feels like they're being forced to move into that modality. This is why we see so much of this energetic slowness is coming to bear, especially if these are situations or circumstances wherein it may feel like they're energetically triggering or difficult, right? That ability to navigate something that typically would create that reactivity point and not feel that. That is that moment that almost allows you to go even energetically deeper into something, because that's that moment of being like, are you okay? I'm fine. You want to proceed? Of course, right? Because that's that moment of experiencing that and saying, I haven't been able to do that before. So that ability of almost not feeling that reactivity space becomes that point of energetic healing. Because again, it's not that something disappears, but the easement by which you can navigate it is indicative of the healing. Continuing to get clarification on these cards right now. Fifth card in our 5-card spread is, we've got here our 9 of Cups in its reversal. This is why this is delicate work right now, especially for the energy in the heart of the divine union frequency. This type of unpacking, this is not the type of unpacking you can do every single minute of the day. You just can't. You'd be too much of like, you walk, I'll put it this way. The ego is the ego for the reason. Like, it's not the fact that we just need to, if we could just remove the energetic ego, we would, but that would be ridiculous. We need it to a certain extent. The ego is what allows us to a great degree to be able to navigate the world at large. And I told you even now that that feeling of the exception to the rule to a certain extent is so viable and important. So again, these energies right now are working through those modalities or moments to be able to navigate through those spaces and places wherein they're able to come into that ability to navigate and unpack this work. And a little bit about this, it's almost tender, because we see even now that ability is one that it's not something that you can do perpetually. It takes, you almost need little breaks. You need those moments that feel like that stop and start, because that's that moment. And I need to express this, that non-reactivity thing, that ability to move through something energetically, come out of it, and then still feel okay after the fact. That is almost that amplification of true energetic healing that's being again, the benchmark is the non-reactivity space, because that's that moment that not only in the moment did something energetically feel like that sensitivity was being navigated in a way that it didn't feel like it was negative, but that's also that moment that even afterwards, that ability to see something and still feel energetically good. That's almost that moment that, again, even if these energies are having hard conversations or navigating difficult topics or pushing themselves in a capacity or in a way that they haven't before, that's almost that moment that feels like that point of true energetic healing, because it's not something that it wasn't just at the moment, but even after the fact, it just feels like it's all energetically positive. While for masculine and feminine energy right now, in the heart coming into divine union, that ability of seeing something and energetically carrying something for another, it creates that sense of energetic protectiveness for both masculine and feminine. A lot of resiliency coming in right now, because what we're effectively seeing is that moment that someone gives you that sensitivity. They give you that sense of pain. They give you that energetic weakness, taking it as your own. It makes you very protective over it. Right? So we see even now that this energy getting very protective in such a way, that is that moment of being able to see someone's energetic vulnerability. But these are not energies that are oh, good, I know where you're vulnerable now. I'll just poke you there. No, these are energies that are I'm going to protect that with even more energetic discernment. I'm going to be even more energetically careful with that. So we see even now that sense of seeing someone who works even more carefully around those spaces and places that we feel energetically sensitive on. It feels like the building forth of not only intimacy, but the possibility of healing something, because it's almost the expressed way of seeing someone carry something that opens the possibility of something being healed, because they're not moving in the way of the energy that may have created the wounds in the first place. Continuing to get clarification on this between the energy and separation right now, this is that parsing out process. And a lot of this may be a lot of conversations introduced about that very important difference, how similar something can look depending on how something is experienced, because that is the difference between, again, energy, and I keep feeling I keep hearing this coming through. energy that does something in a way, and that moment of saying, like, I kept on trying to change something and it wasn't energetically good enough. I kept on trying to do this, and no matter what I could do, like that point of observing a personal failure point, versus that moment of someone feeling that sense of saying, like, someone telling the another, like, I'm doing this for your own good. I'm doing this because this is what you want, right? How nuanced that is, because these are almost those moments where healing, like, it's not the fact that the gesture of healing is being brought forth, but it's being brought forth in a way that feels like it twists it into a negative direction. It doesn't feel like it's productive or positive. It almost creates that space or place that feels like someone is being prescriptive in relationality to how something needs to be energetically carried. That can become that point of difficulty. So we see even now that for a lot of that energy, parsing through those difficult subjects in the past is allowing for a lot of energetic breakthrough, because these are energies that are meeting each other on the energetic path. And that ability, again, seeing that moment of saying, like, I gave someone an energetic vulnerability point and they didn't treat it the way that I would aspire or desire, or I gave someone an energetic vulnerability point and they kept changing the energetic vulnerability, so it made that me feel like I was constantly harming them. We see even now a lot of that energy going through that modality right now. That is almost that moment of feeling some reciprocity here in relationality to being able to energetically heal something by observing the error point in the self, or being able to build a new energetic connection by having that observation point in what was going energetically wrong in the past that wasn't necessarily like on the mark in relationality to feeling like it was truly coming forward from a place of energetic healing. Continuing to get clarification on these cards right now between our Chariot in its reversal in combination with our Emperor card. May I please have one card to clarify? Clarification coming through right now with our Knight of Swords in its upright. Masculine and feminine energy in separation right now. You know, one of the things that that is kind of important right now for masculine energy in separation, this is masculine energy in separation, if on the healing journey, that's taking a lot of accountability. Like, there's a lot of accountability here in terms of what was something that you could change versus what you are experiencing externally. And we see even now for masculine energy, that ability to articulate on this. This is almost that moment of masculine recognizing and identifying. This could even be a lot, I want to say, this could be a lot of masculine energy. That makes sense. Taking accountability for the fact that, you know, when masculine energy is too much in their masculine, their desire to want to activate on things, their desire to want to rush something forward, that sometimes is a moment that the masculine energy can either create those moments of energetic regret or feeling like they've energetically blocked their own blessings, because that can be moments that you recognize from the past that you may feel like you weren't as open and compassionate in relationality to your connection to the feminine, right? And that's that masculine energy almost coming into their own sense of self, building forth on new energetic connections with feminine, almost in that observational point. I'm either seeing here, either masculine energy articulating to feminine and saying to them to a certain degree, I was being energetically selfish. I was only thinking about my own needs or my own desires. Or this is masculine energy building new connections with feminine, saying, it sounds to me like you are dealing with a past and like a past connection of masculine that was too focused on their own needs and their own desires, right? That ability of recognizing that when we become so fixated and focused on our own needs and our own desires, it can make us very blind energetically to what is happening around us. While for masculine and feminine energy, that is coming, and for feminine energy, working through that. This could be a lot of feminine energy articulating to masculine the same energetic story. Feminine energy taking accountability. And this is what's really intriguing here. For some of the feminine energy saying, you know, they were very focused on their energetic needs and desires, but this is the feminine energy saying, and I was facilitating spaces and places where that was okay. Right? This is almost feminine energy looking back at spaces and saying they were very much moving from the place of their desires, and I I let myself get pulled off of the energetic pathwork because it, like, this is almost the feminine articulating that, and almost the feminine coming into that state of energetic accountability in that sense of saying, like, I'm going to be more energetically resilient going forward, because that's the feminine energy doing that work. See how both of these energies, even in that point of healing, having that sense of accountability, masculine saying, I should have taken a softer approach. I did something in a way that was too difficult, too hard. Feminine saying, I should have been more energetically resilient. These are not energies that are saying something energetically happened to them. There's energy here that's doing that path work in terms of articulating where their own, like, path lessons are in relationality to something that almost allows for that collaboration work in terms of feeling that sense of purpose going forward. And that's allowing for new possibilities, right? New opportunities of energetic connection, either again healing and rectifying past experience, or building forth with new energy that is helping to amplify and see something in a way that you could not see it before. While for masculine and feminine energy right now, coming into divine union, that is the energy that we see right now, the energy coming into divine union. This is that energetic equivalent of what happens in the moment that someone energetically carries something with that level and degree of care and empathy and discernment that is potentially oppositional to how a wound was created in the first place. That is that moment that suddenly feels that you may be building forth with an energetic connection that feels like the exception to the rule. And these energies aren't moving forward in that way yet, right? These are not energies that are moving full tilt into healing something energetically that they're carrying. But there's almost that moment right now that almost feels like, again, for feminine, seeing a masculine that holds forth in this way, it almost like feels like that sense of energetic unfairness, because that's almost the feminine looking to masculine and saying, you have to carry the hurts that you did not perform upon me. You have to bear the brunt of the weight of something that you didn't even do. There was a wound that was created here, and you have to kind of experience it or hold room for it. And that's almost the feminine articulating to the masculine at that time and saying, it's not that I feel like you would do the same. And the masculine here, like, again, what's happening in this degree? This isn't masculine saying, why do you think I'm like that? This is masculine saying, I understand. This is a masculine saying, I understand that you're not holding that wound in that way because you feel that I am the same way. I understand that you're still energetically recovering from the state or space of what created that wound in the first place, right? So that's the feminine, again, being able to articulate to masculine a limitation, an insecurity, a wound, and masculine not taking it personally and almost holding space for it is the moment that the feminine feels truly like that masculine is a strong masculine, because that's a masculine that can look at something with enough compassion and say, I understand that you're not saying that I am that same type of way. I'm not saying that when you ask me to hold space for a wound, it's because you think that I would also do the same to you. I understand that you're asking me to hold a wound because it energetically hurts. And you're basically saying, this is still hurting me. So we see now that the feminine seeing a masculine that's able to do that to that capacity, it feels like that immediate moment of energetic safety. Because that's almost a minute of feminine saying, I know that you are the exception to the rule. I know that you are the masculine energy that would not do that, because you can articulate and understand why I would energetically feel that. While for masculine energy, the same is here. If this is a feminine that you have these limitations points with, this is not a feminine that requires you to be strong all the time. This is a feminine energy that sees your own weaknesses, your own vulnerabilities, and doesn't force those places, doesn't push you where you don't want to go. This is a feminine energy that almost makes room for your sensitivities, your insecurities. But again, it isn't forcing you to probe into them in the way that the feminine might aspire and desire, almost saying to the masculine, on your time. These are energies that are learning that sense and gift of the masculine, feeling that easement point in a feminine that they can trust just the same way as the feminine can trust them. Because this is a feminine that is resilient enough to understand that, like, that ability to come into a point of softness, that's very energetically difficult for the masculine, right? And that ability of the masculine feeling like that sense of knowing that they don't have to proceed in that way with the feminine, but that the feminine's always there for when they're ready to do so. That immediately creates that sense of the masculine almost starting to feel energetically ready to move forward in that capacity. While for masculine and feminine energy in the heart of the divine union right now, this is the energy that, again, is navigating forward on difficult situations, difficult circumstances, spaces and places that potentially created reactivity points in masculine in the past. Masculine approaching them very carefully, navigating and observing their own triggers there, all for the sake, what feels like a victory point if you're navigating something that typically triggers you and it doesn't. That ability not to do anything, that ability not to react, it feels like, immediately feels like a breakthrough. Because that's that moment of the masculine feeling like that is a conquering of their own self. While for feminine, the same. A masculine that, again, is conscientious as you proceed forward in that way. Almost allowing that modality of experiencing something and building forth in that way of, again, a masculine that does not feel that like that amplification of being triggered. That is also the feminine energy being able to heal something, because that's the feminine saying, like, again, the difference between feeling like a masculine that's trying to say, like, I know what's best for you, versus a masculine saying, I want what's best for you, right? So that energetic mindfulness is what is allowing a lot of these energies right now to have those breakthroughs. Continuing to have clarification on these cards right now between our Emperor and our Five of Wands in its reversal. May I please have one card to clarify? Clarification coming through right now with our High Priestess in its reversal. This is why it's so important right now with this type of work, because we see even now masculine and feminine energy that is in the divine union frequency. This, how do I explain this best? The feminine energy doubting their own self, not trusting their own, like going into those spaces of questioning themselves, doubting themselves. This is like, do you see how these energies are working through? This is what the energies are working through right now and navigating those triggers, right? For masculine, it is not coming into that state or space of reactivity. For feminine, it's not coming into that space or state of energetically questioning themselves. Both of these energies working through these moments or modalities, but what is showing that express difference here? The express difference, if you will, is that energetic resiliency to the point of trusting oneself in relationality to what it is that you aspire and desire, and being able to stay firm in terms of that locationality or that direction, right? We see even now these energies taking a little bit of a wait and see approach. Like a lot of these energies right now that are going forward in this way, it feels a lot like that point of uncertainty, because again, if you're breaking through your own cycles, you don't know what to expect, right? But what's important when you don't know what to expect, if you don't know what to expect, you better be pretty intentional on what it is that you aspire and desire for, because that's going to be your cardinal direction. So we see even now that the ability of these energies, what are these energies focusing on to help through this work? It's not that they're doing it for the sake of the other, but in a way they also are, because I don't mean, that's the difference between doing something for someone else, like doing it for them, like you're doing the work for them, versus doing something that you yourself would aspire and desire, feeling the energy of a counterpart that also supports you moving forward in that fashion. So we see even now that a lot of that energy is doing that difficult work in response to like navigating spaces and places that they typically wouldn't be able to, all via the support of the energetic connection of the counterpart. While for masculine and feminine energy right now that is coming into divine union, this energetic equivalent, this is the modality of not being able not to push forward in that way, not being able to push forward in that point, holding space for one another immediately creates a possibility of energetically healing something. Because that moment of experiencing something and observing something and stating something to someone and seeing them energetically carry it in a way that shows their own mindfulness immediately is a reminder that the energy that you're moving towards is not moving in the same way as the energies that caused the wounds in the first place. So what we effectively see to a certain extent is even now this is that possibility that the energy coming into divine union is feeling about healing an old wound or hurt in a way that they haven't before, all because seeing that express difference of a counterpart that is energetically mindful in how you would aspire and desire something to be held. While for masculine and feminine in separation right now, this is a lot of new energetic connections that are talking about situations and circumstances that they feel like reach that point of impossibility. And that's either that moment that's allowing for the breakthrough and someone taking accountability for the way that they were doing something in the past that was preventing the ability to move forward productively, or these are new energetic connections talking about connections to past individuals or situations that almost created something that felt like one could never do something energetically right? For masculine, that's that moment of either taking accountability and saying, I was trying to move too much around. I was too focused on my own self. I was too mindful of what I wanted. I blocked my own blessings by trying to move too quickly and not being energetically mindful of those around me, right? Or this is masculine energy that is hearing a feminine articulate this and say this to the feminine, saying it sounds like the masculine energy that you were in connectivity to was too focused on their own desires. They were too focused on their own needs. They weren't mindful about what you wanted energetically as well. For feminine, this is again either the feminine energy articulating to masculine and saying, I had these moments or modalities wherein I was too lenient. I was too flexible. I didn't know what I wanted. I created this modality where my connection to someone was one that I was allowing my own boundaries to be crossed and I wasn't articulating them, right? That's the feminine coming into that point of empowerment. Or this is the feminine energy saying or talking to new energetic connections of masculine and almost saying to the masculine in separation, it sounds like that energy didn't know what they wanted. It sounds like they were too adaptable. It sounded like it was too difficult because they were changing so much. It was hard for you to be able to navigate and understand what was the right way to move. So we see even now a lot of this energy doing that very careful discernment to help utilize what feels like it is something that could have been changed within the self versus something that was being energetically experienced. And both of them, these are energies that are meeting one another from a point of energetic accountability, like observing what they wanted to change that facilitates either, again, healing or new energetic connections. Continuing to get clarification on these cards right now between our Five of Swords, Wands, and its reversal in combination with our Five of Pentacles. We've got our double fives out today. So a lot of this, like I told you, a lot of this resiliency around things that typically would be triggers, but like almost like navigating them in a way that feels like it's energetically easier today. One card to clarify, please. Clarification coming through right now with our Page of Wands in its reversal. Why? Here comes a little, look at this. Here comes the little inner child wound coming out to play, right? I can hear a lot of energy and separation either saying I was acting like a child or they were acting like a child. Like I can literally hear it's either they're saying someone's saying I was acting like a child, I was being selfish like a child, or they were acting like a child. Maybe a little bit of both. Maybe there's just like I'm almost seeing that a lot of energy right now in separation going, maybe a little bit of both, because that often happens. What happens when someone's unhealed inner child comes out? It's all too easy for it to trigger our unhealed inner child. That's why, again, we don't match energy, because that's that moment of being like, if you want to act funny, I can act hilarious, right? So we see even now that like a lot of that energy to a certain extent is navigating through some of that unhealed inner child work. But what's beautiful for a lot of the energy and separation to a certain extent is taking energetic accountability for that, right? Taking that energetic accountability. For feminine, this could be a lot of feminine energy saying, I don't mirror energy like that anymore. This is almost a feminine energy in separation saying, like, I recognized, like, that's the feminine almost coming to that point of saying, like, I recognize that I have the ability to mirror energy. I recognize that I often, like, will, reflect what I'm being given. So this is almost the feminine energy, almost saying, I'm working on healing my own inner child so that I don't necessarily come into that state or space of doing that to a certain extent. Because what we really see here is for a lot of that energy, that ability to identify and to see, they literally see or observe that. What happens when, again, the feminine energy is too adaptable, right? Much like a child, right? What happens when the masculine energy moves towards things and only from a place or space of their energetic desire, much like an unhealed inner child. So being able to observe the unhealed inner child is what allows you to basically facilitate and heal it, because it's not that it goes away, but it's almost that moment of being able to energetically recognize something, that it makes it easier to move forward towards. And we see even now that for a lot of that energy and separation, this is either talking about your own unhealed inner child or having to deal with someone else's, right? Like, but this is the bridge that is now being formed, because even the ability to articulate on this is feeling like that sense of finding someone that is on your path work, because they're doing the same stuff. They're seeing something in the same way. They are observing something in the, like they're saying their own perception. I told you, as long as feminine's like, if you're seeing this, if you're articulating on this, if you're not just reacting to it, but you're observing it within the self, this is that point that like allows for that energetic breakthrough. So we see for the energy coming into divine union right now, a lot of that work is navigating. I told you what happens when we build into intimacy with someone. We start really seeing that inner child. We start seeing that part of themselves that they might not necessarily even see, right? Like that little part of the self that like hides in the details of one's own ego, those insecurities, those doubts, those fears, those idiosyncrasies. Are these energies like calling them out in each other? Being like, like, it's like, no. They're navigating them in a way that they're being conscientious about it, because it's almost that moment of seeing something in another that they themselves can't see. Right? And that's that moment that, again, it feels almost like that precious moment, because that's that moment that you kind of see those moments and you see that like smaller side of them, but it doesn't create that sense of feeling like rejection in that moment. It's almost like starting to build that empathetic care for that person behind the person, if you will, specifically because of the way that that energy facilitates it in such a way. What happens when we start to work on healing our unhealed inner child? We don't harm each other with it. We almost can begin that state of space of just enjoying it. That's that moment of seeing something that doesn't feel like it's energetically harming us because someone doesn't have control over it, but almost just becomes that like sweet idiosyncrasy, if you will, right? And that's that moment that you get almost like a little protective over it, right? Because that's a moment that like you're working to protect their unhealed inner child as well. Masculine and feminine energy in the heart of divine union frequency, a little bit of the opposite right now. These are energies that are working into trying to come into their highest version of self. And the only way to come into the highest version of self is to try to heal the unhealed inner child. Right? That's that moment that takes a little, and it's hard, right? Because that's that moment of being like having to look at someone and say like, I know why you move in that way, but it's time to energetically let that go now, right? And these are those energies that almost feel to a certain extent like, what is the point of energetic success right now? Those moments or modalities that would typically create that energetic trigger, but not letting it trigger you. Just almost observing it. Coming into that point of observation. Recognizing that process and letting something navigate forward in a way that like, it doesn't create that reactivity point in you. It just creates that point of observing one's own tendency to react in that capacity. That in itself allows for a little bit of that energetic breakthrough, because that's that moment that almost feels like that express point of saying like, I'm trying to like energetically release something here in such a way that feels like I'm pushing my own energetic boundaries. So a lot of this work right now for energy in the heart of the divine union frequency, it's hard, it's challenging, but the non-reactivity is the point of success. Clarification between our 5 of Pentacles in combination with our 9 of Cups in its reversal. One card to clarify, please. Clarification coming through right now with our 5 of Cups. Masculine and feminine energy right now. In the divine union frequency, there's a lot of grief here. There's a lot of grief that's being navigated here, right? Because there's a lot of this moment that we're seeing to a certain extent, just allowing yourself to feel. I told you, a lot of the problem with abandonment wounds is that you can't necessarily let it go, if you will, right? You can't necessarily let it go. You can't have that moment of just saying, oh, good, I found the abandonment wound, I can just like let it go now. You have to carry it with you to a certain extent, you know, seeing and observing it is one thing. Holding space for it is one thing. And what we see here to a certain extent is a lot of the energy right now facing and confronting their own abandonment wounds. And it's painful because seeing the abandonment wound doesn't make it disappear. It just leads that broadening of expansion of the full grief around something and how hard it is or how heavy it is to energetically carry. And we see even now that even that ability to like observe it, like a lot of this may feel like you're allowing yourself to energetically grieve for things that you might typically not look at, right? Because that's that moment of like facing something and not coming into that space or place of energetic denial, but almost like just confronting something. And for the energy right now, in the heart of the divine union, a lot of that ability of just not feeling like you're energetically alone in that process is what is helping create that sense of like trusting the energetic process at the same time. Well, for masculine and feminine energy coming into divine union right now, this equivalent, holding space, seeing someone, what happens in the minute someone holds something in a way that someone hasn't held something before? It's like, why do I feel so happy and sad at the same time? Because it immediately reminds you of what created the wound in the first place. The minute you don't have someone react in the way that caused the wound is the minute that you can start to see the wound, because it's that sudden reminder that there was an alternative path, there was an alternative action, there was a different way that something could energetically go, that immediately creates that moment of being able to see something more clearly at the moment that something isn't carried the way that it was carried in the past. And that's why we come into those moments of healing. And the minute someone gives us something that we haven't seen before, it can feel so harrowing, because it can be those moments being like, I didn't even know I had to heal that. I didn't know I had to heal that because I've experienced what was unhealed so many times that I just expected that that was the way it was going to be navigated. So we see even now that for a lot of that energy, you can be moving into divine union, be like, why do I feel so emotional? Like, that's why. Because that's that moment that suddenly feels like that suddenly you're feeling grief for something you didn't know you were holding grief for, right? While for energy right now, coming in separation, these new energetic connections, this is either that moment of getting some kind of apology that you were holding and waiting for, getting that moment of someone energetically saying like, I see it now. That was not right. I was wrong there. I can see what I needed to change. I can see that I was moving or acting like an unhealed child. Like that energy, being able to do that, come into that point of observation, it can feel very energetically overwhelming. And that moment is either one that feels like that point of observation, someone being able to admit and articulate what they energetically did that requires that sense of accountability, either feels like that moment of holding grief for one another, or it's that moment of building upon new energetic connections wherein we see that for a lot of the energy moving through that way, that ability of recognizing, that ability of experiencing something and suddenly saying, having a new energetic connection, say, you shouldn't have been treated like that. I don't think that that was your fault. Like, I think that that's something that you needed to change. All of that energy coming through is immediately allowing, even now, while those new energies are still moving forward with a point of pain, it also feels to a certain degree like there's a lot of catharsis on that journey, because a lot of this energy is experiencing and finding one another in spaces that are very energetically similar. Continuing to get clarification on these cards right now between our Knight of Swords in its upright and our High Priestess in its reversal. One card to clarify, please. Clarification coming through right now with our star energy. We love to see this one coming out. Masculine and feminine energy in separation. This is really beautiful because, again, what are we seeing that is occurring right now? We're either seeing that there's a lot of this energetic equivalent of masculine coming towards feminine from that point of, again, reprioritization, accountability, being able to come back to feminine, because what is the masculine saying that's coming back to feminine right now? I saw you in the wrong way. I treated you in the wrong way. I did not prioritize you, right? Like that's that energy of the masculine readjusting or reprioritizing creates that pathwork of energetic healing, right? And it all comes from the masculine almost taking the energetic accountability for how they were behaving towards the feminine in the past, right? Especially if this is masculine energy on the healing journey that is able to look and see something from the past that they're able to bring forward in the present. Or this is masculine energy that is bringing forth new energetic connections with feminine, articulating and saying to a certain extent, like look at this. This is masculine being like, I could have done something energetically better. I take full accountability for something that happened in the past. I wasn't energetically honest. I was prioritizing myself too much. And what is the feminine saying in the moment that the masculine energy is able to articulate the way that they did not necessarily do something? This is almost the feminine energy that looks to the masculine and says, your ability to ascertain and to recognize that already shows that you've started to energetically heal. Your own ability to look at something and say, I would do something better or different. That is almost immediately that moment that creates that state or space of feminine, helping the masculine parse out and say, well, let's see how much of this was you. Like this is the feminine almost working through that moment and trying to act as a clear mirror to the masculine. Because again, this isn't the feminine that sees a masculine that like completely puts all of that objectivity out on the feminine. This isn't a masculine that's saying like, I am energetically perfect. I just keep having feminine energy that's just not there, not right. This is masculine that's like almost articulating and saying, I understand what I could do differently. I am taking my own share of the burden. And that's the feminine saying, as long as it's there, I can see that you're already on that path. While for masculine energy right now, this is the same thing with feminine. If this is feminine saying, I energetically blame myself for X, Y, and Z, that masculine energy, they were very much like moving in that direction. And I allowed that, that's a feminine taking that accountability and saying, I didn't trust myself. I didn't advocate for myself enough. I didn't do enough of that work. That's a masculine almost saying, again, well, it seems like you're doing that energetically now, right? Because your own ability to articulate on that, your own ability to see something is almost that point of like recognizing this is the masculine helping and being a clear mirror to the feminine to a certain extent. And saying like, again, what are these energies saying? Make sure that your mirror is clear, right? They're almost like building new energetic connections by trying to help clear one another's mirrors, right? While for masculine and feminine energy, and for masculine seeing a feminine that again is able to articulate on that. That's again the masculine feeling the strength of a feminine that feels very secure in themselves and what they want and what they know that they need to change within themselves. While for masculine and feminine energy right now that is coming into divine union, this is that energetic equivalent of both masculine and feminine feeling the energetic support that could amplify some kind of change here, right? Because what happens the minute that masculine encounters feminine and they feel like they see those insecurities in the masculine, but feminine doesn't try to pick them apart. Feminine doesn't try to like look at masculine like they're lacking. Feminine doesn't start to like criticize or judge the masculine for how they choose to carry something. That's the masculine that almost immediately feels that sense of trust to a feminine, because that's a masculine feeling that sense of knowing that if they open up towards the feminine, it's always going to be in that space of energetic acceptance, because that's not a feminine energy that is trying to change the masculine. That is a feminine energy that just wants to see more, that wants to understand more, that approaches masculine with that sense of curiosity. While for feminine energy, seeing a masculine not taking that point of insecurity, not taking those wounds personally, not coming into a space of saying like you need to energetically change that, you're energetically wrong, but almost saying I can hold space for the fact that you're energetically sensitive there, but I'm also going to protect those spaces like to within a fiber of my being, because now they're my wounds too. That is the feminine that feels the preciousness of being held by masculine, in the sense of a masculine saying like I'm not energetically with you to change you. I'm here to accept all of you, even those moments of insecurity. While for masculine and feminine energy that is coming in, that is in the heart of the divine union, this is that energetic equivalent right now of masculine and feminine energy working and building into that sense of resiliency, right? But that resiliency to a certain extent is within the self. These are not energies that are asking the other energy to be energetically resilient. These are the energies that are standing even more resiliently for the sake, and they're pushing through, they're pushing past their own energetic boundaries for the sake of the energetic counterpart. And when I say for the sake of the energetic counterpart, I don't mean that they're changing themselves to accommodate the energetic counterpart. They're challenging themselves for the sake of with the support of the energetic counterpart, right? Those are different. There's nuance there. And we see it is bringing forward different aspects of feminine and masculine. Masculine, creating a lot of vitality, creating a lot of path of purpose right now, staying very focused on their energetic goals. Feminine, not building into that state of questioning themselves, building in that, taking almost, again, reflecting the masculine's own determination and letting that be one of the feminine, being very like authentic and open in relationality to their highest version of self. Both of these energies begin like working in that way all because of that sense of working towards healing energetically that which they haven't healed before. While for the energy right now, continuing to get clarification on these cards right now, this is the energy in separation. This is the feminine and masculine both challenging themselves. Feminine trying to be very authentic and honest, right? But what we see here is this is the feminine energy trying to be authentic and honest in relationality to what they feel is like what it is that they truly aspire and desire versus what they don't aspire and desire. They're being as authentic as possible as their path work going forward in the past, because this is the feminine energy saying, I'm not going to feel like I need to change for the masculine energy that's coming towards me. The masculine energy of the feminine in separation, feminine's almost saying, I want masculine to accept me as I truly am, not as how they may aspire or desire to be. I'm not going to create this false sense of self to be energetically appealing to the masculine. I want the masculine to accept me for who I am and what I am, because that's that moment of me effectively being able to find the energetic counterpart that is truly for me. Masculine doing the same work. It's harder for the masculine because masculine is no longer looking at that as an act of rejection. This is a masculine reminding themselves, if in separation, if the masculine leads forth to feminine with a state of openness, honesty, and clarity, and feminine rejects them at that moment, that is not rejection. That is a lack of alignment, because as long as the feminine is being authentic to the masculine, if there's something that the masculine desires and the feminine doesn't desire, that's not a moment of trying to shift one or the other into that state of desirability. That's that moment of just saying we're not in alignment and letting that be a moment that feels like it's energetically healing. Continuing to get clarification on these cards right now, between our High Priestess in its reversal in combination with our Page of Wands in its reversal. We've got clarity with our Nine of Wands in its reversal. And this is what's really beautiful, because this is a lot of the work that we saw that was occurring right now as we came out of that process, closing out the eclipse, Mercury retrograde, Scorpio, full moon experience. What was the big takeaway from that period? Taking something that felt like a wound and turning it into a standard. Taking something that hurts, turning it into something that heals. Both of these energies, even in separation, doing this. Feminine, letting go of anything that feels like it's energetic bitterness, because the feminine almost identifying and saying that bitterness is almost like the feminine saying, why do I want someone energetically? Thank you. Why do I want something energetically that feels like it's coming towards me in a way that doesn't feel like it is appreciative towards what I bring forth? Right? That's a lot of the feminine energy that's almost saying, like an almost feminine energy saying to a certain extent, if I feel like to a certain extent like I was becoming too adaptable, that's potentially the feminine externalizing and saying, I was working with someone who was going through that process of feeling like they hadn't healed their inner child, right? Because that's the feminine almost saying, like, I'm being more energetically mindful of navigating energy that feels like they're doing that work to heal the inner child. And the feminine saying, my own inner child often comes out if I'm navigating spaces or places with someone who has an unhealed inner child that they're leading forth with. So even now, that feminine energy, being very energetically mindful of that in separation, this is the feminine energy that's just like looking towards it now with an active energetic discernment to be able to discern whether that is the case or not. And that's that moment of, again, navigating forward. And this is almost the feminine saying, I'm going to articulate on what I've experienced with masculine in the past. And if that creates a masculine that's energetically triggered at a time that I express a wound, then that's the feminine saying that that's the expression of a masculine that hasn't done enough of their inner child healing, because that's not that moment of a masculine feeling the compassion. If someone says this is something that energetically hurt me, this is almost a masculine getting like defensive and being like, well, I wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? Like that's that moment that almost feels like that separation point, because that's the difference of a masculine. It's almost to say like, I'm able to hold space. I'm healing my own feminine energy, versus masculine that like takes that feeling of the feminine expressing a wound personally, right? While for masculine energy in separation right now, that same modality, this is potentially a lot of the masculine energy coming into that state or space of looking towards feminine and almost seeking a feminine that's able to articulate what it is that they energetically desire, right? Because this is masculine that almost is worried about the feminine that feels like they're too energetically adaptable. This could be that moment in the past where the masculine feels like when the feminine is too energetically adaptable, it creates too much of that moment for masculine of not knowing what it is that the feminine truly wants and desires, which almost creates that point of anxiety for masculine, because the masculine energetically fears moving towards feminine in a moment that feels like there's that sense of like pathwork is in alignment, and then discovering that that wasn't the case. So we see even now that for a lot of the masculine energy, how are these energies building connections right now? They're articulating on these experiences, and they're almost looking to the other to see what their perception of something is, and recognizing and saying, if someone perceives something in the same way that I perceive it, that would be a good assertion point in recognizing whether there is energetic alignment. Because that modality of not only experiencing something that feels similar, but having experienced it in similar ways is almost, again, or if not in similar ways, taking the same energetic lesson from a circumstance or situation. That can also be indications on being in alignment, because you're looking at experiences and you're taking the same feedback out of them. While for masculine and feminine energy right now, that is coming into divine union, this is that moment that you're building forth and feeling energetically safe with one another. And this is like a higher degree of energetic safety than you may have had even prior to this point, because this is that moment that you're not just feeling energetically safe in relationality to what you typically express to the world, but these are energies that are seeing their softer sides. They're seeing the parts that others don't typically see. And that being able to build forth in that way, that is that moment that's like building into the heart of intimacy, because it's almost that amplification to a certain extent of like, the more you see, the more you love. The more you see, the more you love. The more you see, the more you love. It's not creating those places of doubt or fear. It's almost like amplifying that sense of like, you know, that investment in one another, because it's even that moment that like even these parts of themselves that they don't typically feel proud of energetically, these are the energies of counterparts saying, I don't see anything there that I don't love. Masculine and feminine energy, potentially something that could be healed, but not something that can't be loved. Masculine and feminine energy in the heart of the divine union frequency right now. A lot of that energetic equivalent, this is that moment of, again, navigating forward in healing any of those insecurities, any of those places, because you trust one another so much that you feel like you can go forward into those spaces and places that typically would create that anxiety point. But trusting in the other along the way is what amplifies that feeling of doing so in a way that it doesn't feel, even if you're pushing yourself in that way, it doesn't feel like you're pushing against a boundary. You're just navigating something that you aspire and desire to do with the sake of feeling energetically someone that is doing so in the same way. And if it's not easy, that feeling like you're doing something not easy with someone that is also experiencing that same sense of like difficulty, that is that moment that doesn't feel like you're changing for a person. It feels like you're changing with a person. And that can be something that can be very energetically empowering. Continuing to get clarification on these cards right now between our Page of Wands in combination with our Five of Cups. In Page of Wands in its reversal, in combination with our Page of Cups in its upright. One card, please. Clarification coming through right now with our King of Pentacles. We love to see this. A lot of this stability coming through right now, particularly for the masculine energy. Last reading, we saw that it was a little bit easier going for the feminine. Today, it's a little bit easier for the masculine. There's a lot of this masculine energy right now. I got to say, there's a lot of masculine energy doing a lot of this inner child healing right now. And what happens when we experience that inner child healing? It's not that those doubts and fears and anxieties come up, but we see them and we identify them for what they are, right? For masculine energy, this is almost like that sense of the higher self. This is the masculine's like higher version of self, focusing on stability. So what is the masculine energy doing right now in relationality to anything that may have come up around the unhealed inner child? Masculine is firming it up in the present. I told you, this is how we're going to release a lot of that energetic grief of the past, especially if there's something where masculine's holding some kind of feeling of energetic regret for things that occurred in the past. This is the masculine energy doing that double path work of taking accountability for the past version of self, but navigating forward and letting it set the course and building that sense of energetic firmness in the present. And this is what I mean about the masculine, building a little bit of energetic resilience here. Because this is almost the masculine energy. Like, what happens in that moment that we can look back on the past and say, yeah, I would do something differently. That moment immediately opens that sense of saying, and I'm doing so now, right? The minute that we're able to take energetic accountability in that way is the minute we recognize we are no longer that energetic person. We're no longer that sense of self, because that's the ability of looking and being able to like speak from your chest energetically and say, you don't have to speak from your chest because everything that you've done from the past is energetically perfect, but your ability to do so now, like that is creating that state or space of feeling that sense of I want to say like stability, like of strength, right? That's the masculine almost taking the energetic accountability for the actions of the present. And so for the energy right now in the heart of the divine union frequency, a good portion of this really feels like this is that moment I told you. Like, what happens the minute that you're able to probe through something that typically creates a reactivity space? You leave yourself energetically open to finally be able to mourn something, right? Because often, what does that anger, what does that volatility usually mask? It usually masks sadness or grief or fear or shame. So we see even now that for a lot of the masculine energy, being able to work through that process of navigating something that typically would be an insensitivity point and not letting it create that sense of reactivity in you. It almost allows you to push through and suddenly feel that sense of strength because you're allowing yourself to feel the energetic feelings that are behind the reactivity space. So even now we feel like that's a lot of the masculine feeling even more stable energetically, having gone through that process. While for feminine energy right now, that same modality, being able to experience something, being able to almost articulate on places and spaces where one may have felt your own inner child was wounded, was harmed, right? This is the feminine energy that may feel like a lot of those inner child wounds from the past were amplified by, like, again, what are a lot of the inner child wounds from the masculine amplified by the feminine? What are a lot of the inner child wounds from the feminine amplified by the masculine? So as we heal these, we rebuild our own connection to those pathways. So for feminine energy, being able to articulate on the experience that caused that sense of uncertainty, that caused that sense of doubt, that caused that sense of grief, and then feeling the masculine that's almost, again, not energetically repeating that process. That is also how the feminine feels like they're able to heal their own inner child and also make space for grief, all by not allowing themselves to be reactive. While for masculine and feminine energy right now, coming into divine union, this is that modality of seeing to a certain extent aspects of the other, holding space for the pain that one energetically carries. These aren't energies that are making them face those parts of the self right now, but you're almost seeing them with better clarity. And that can be one of those moments that, like, again, you almost feel those points when you build intimacy with someone where you see like the younger self behind the older self. You see that like inner child. And you see in a way how like the mask of the self today like works in a way to kind of facilitate and protect the energy of that child from those spaces and places that they couldn't necessarily protect themselves from at the time that a wound may have occurred. While for masculine and feminine energy right now in separation, a lot of this work that we're seeing to a certain extent right now, this feels like that amplification of catharsis through the new energetic connections. There's a lot of energetic apology here, even if these are new energetic connections. There's a lot of taking accountability I'm seeing in a lot of these new energetic connections right now. But what happens in the moment that we take energetic accountability for something that occurred in the past, that creates that affirmation in the present that allows for new path work. So even now, this is almost energy that's looking at one another and saying, you've obviously changed. If you can look at something from the past and you can have that sense of energetic regret around something, right? For masculine and feminine, it does feel like it's coming from different spaces and places. For feminine, this is the observation point of potentially feeling like something externally happened around them. They weren't able to heal someone. Like, this is almost a feminine energy saying, like, I was hoping I would be able to energetically heal someone. I moved towards someone because I wanted to heal their inner child, and I realized it wasn't my place or space to do so. While for masculine, this may be the masculine almost saying to the feminine, I allowed my inner child to like take the wheel. I allowed them to like drive something in a direction that it shouldn't have necessarily gone in, or I have some points of accountability, and I'm committed now not to repeating those same energetic lessons. So both of these energies almost holding space for one another in that sense of regret. But even in that space of holding energy in the space of being able to regret something becomes those new energetic possibilities. Continuing to get clarification on these cards right now between our star in combination with our 9 of wands in its reversal. One card to clarify. 5 of swords in its reversal. One of the things we love about this right now for a lot of the energy and separation, even if these are paths of restoration, not going back to the past. This is not energy that's saying to themselves, let's just go back to the way things were. This is not energy that wants to go back to the way something was. That's the important thing about this. These are not the energetic connections of someone saying, I want what we used to have. This is energy that's coming back if there's something healing here and saying, I'm coming back because I can do something energetically better. I see what that limitation was. I see what that blockage was. I identify and understand what needs to energetically change here. So we see even now, this is either the feminine energy that is leaving themselves, like there's that openness, there's that honesty that the feminine's experiencing at this moment. A lot of vulnerability here for the feminine. But this is the feminine that's almost speaking from the heart, because this is the feminine energy saying, I refuse to be in that space or place that I was in the past. This may have felt like the feminine was trying in the past to walk on eggshells, to be what the masculine may have wanted them to be or desired them to be. And this is the feminine energy that's almost moving forward and saying, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to be my authentic sense of self. And if that sends a masculine away from me, this is the feminine saying, wonderful. Because that's the sign of not being in alignment. And this is the feminine energy saying, I'm not going to change who I am to try to accommodate the energy of what an unhealed inner child wants. Because that's the feminine almost saying, like, what happens in those moments is like feminine doesn't feel like they need to change for a masculine that truly knows what they want. Feminine feels like they have to change and accommodate for a child, inner child energy, an inner child that like just wants feminine to be whatever they desire them to be at that moment. While we see here for masculine energy and separation, this modality, this sense of saying, if I want feminine to really want what I want, I need to lead forward to feminine from a state or space of being energetically honest. If I want a feminine that's going to like open up to me, I better be willing to open up to them. If I want a feminine that's going to be vulnerable, I myself must be vulnerable and kind. This is why we see even now that this is pathwork of masculine healing something from the past with an affirmation of how they're going to treat the feminine going forward. And that's the feminine masculine energy saying, I don't come towards feminine with the expectation that they'll just be energetically open to me. I recognize and identify that this is the masculine almost saying the feminine is in that modality where they will be open if they know that I am someone that can be energetically trusted. That the feminine does not just, the feminine doesn't energetically owe me that level or degree of openness. That's something that needs to be energetically earned. And so we see even now that that's a lot of the masculine doing a lot of that path work that almost feels like they're reconciling or rehabilitating whatever they're holding regret from. Either again, building forth towards feminine from that point of energetic healing with that accountability, or this is masculine leading forth towards feminine with that new perception now. While for masculine and feminine energy, either coming into divine union or in the heart of the divine union, this is the feminine energy. Again, what happens when the feminine energy doesn't feel like the stability, that the security needs to be energetically earned? That's that moment of the feminine really feeling like they're coming into that point of energetically flourishing, because this is almost that moment of the feminine. If this is a moment of feminine showing the masculine their insecurities and their vulnerabilities, And again, having done that work of not subjecting the masculine to those via their emotions, but being able to articulate upon them, this is the feminine energy that feels the full breadth of being able to be their most authentic version of self, because this is the masculine almost holding space for all of the feminine, insecurities included, and not demanding that the feminine change any of them, but almost celebrating the feminine in their most raw, vital essence of self. While for masculine energy, seeing a feminine that is confident in their own self, that doesn't feel that sense of insecurity, like that insecurity that the feminine feels, it isn't around the connection, right? It's not around the connection. It may be around their past experiences. It may be around their past self, but that's not the feminine energy that allows those internal insecurities to be outwardly expressed in their connection with the masculine. This is also the masculine that feels energetically protected, because that's the masculine energy feeling the strength of a feminine that truly feels that sense of energetic support and identifying and knowing what they want, and also building upon that energetic trust that they're creating with the masculine, right? Because that's that moment of the feminine almost acting like an energetic mirror to the masculine, that feels like there's that point of energetic alignment and something being very easy because you're choosing to carry it in the same way. While for masculine and feminine energy right now, in the heart of the divine union, this is that a lot of this energy that's working right now towards healing anything that you brought forth into the divine union frequency that wasn't created in it. And if this is something to do with unhealed wounds, insecurities, that ability to address something and say, there's no place for this here. That almost easement, it feels like a little bit of that release process, because it's that moment that almost feels like the amplification of letting something go, because it's that sense of saying I needed this to protect myself prior to being here, but now's that moment that I can let something go, because you are the energetic exception to the rule, wherein I recognize and realize I don't need to carry that. Continuing to get clarity on these cards right now, between our Nine of Wands and its reversal and our King of Pentacles. One card to clarify, please. Clarification coming through right now with our King of Wands in its reversal. Masculine and feminine energy right now that is in the divine union frequency. This is that modality again that's I want to say, this is a lot of the masculine energy navigating and healing. Okay, I'll put it, okay. So the masculine energy, recognizing and identifying. And this is why the masculine energy is working to heal the unhealed inner child so much. Because the masculine understands and recognizes in the divine union frequency that the unhealed inner child of the masculine doesn't stay in childlike energy. It adopts the expression of the shadow self. It adopts the expression of the shadow self, because that's that moment that, again, while that may feel like something that is being navigated within the masculine, that is that moment of something that feels very much like it is innocuous within the masculine, that can almost be expresses itself in the body of the masculine as what happened. Okay, this is the best way I can explain this. Okay, ready? Listen to this. When the masculine has an unhealed inner child, the unhealed inner child is used to being expressing itself in the body of a small child. But when the masculine is in a big body, what happens when there's an unhealed inner child navigating a big body? It's that moment that it doesn't feel as innocuous. It doesn't feel as energetically harmless, because that's that moment. It's giving I'll put it this way. It's giving someone small a mecha. It's like giving them a mech bot. You know what I mean? You ever see anime? You take somebody small and you put them in something big. And that's that moment that you take a step and suddenly you've destroyed a small city. So even now, this is the masculine energy that's taking accountability for the vital reason why it's so important to heal the unhealed inner child. Because when the masculine doesn't heal the unhealed inner child, it is like giving the small inner child that is afraid a very big, very dangerous robot. Okay? That is the best way I can kind of describe this to a certain extent. So we see even now that this is the masculine energy working through their own fears, working through their own insecurities, being able to embody, coming into literally embodying the body that they're in, like finding their higher self through identifying and recognizing and embodying the self that they are now, and accepting and working to heal the younger self by recognizing and identifying not only what happens when it inhabits, but how it is energetically perceived. That something that feels like it is playful can take on something that feels like it is much more, does not feel sweet, like does not feel playful in the context of the larger body. That's that moment that something that feels like it is harmless can almost feel like it is something that is meant to express harm because of the body through which it is extending itself through. So for the masculine energy to recognize and identify that, that is almost that process of not wanting the energy around the masculine to misunderstand the motivations of the masculine via something that they may have felt like they could do very easily as a child that is often being misinterpreted in the present context of self. While for feminine energy right now, that same path work is occurring right now by understanding and recognizing that that may have energetically occurred in some experiences from the past, wherein again, the unhealed inner child was expressing itself in a big body. And that's that moment that again allows for a sense of understanding, but does not almost like, it's like that moment of almost looking at something and saying, you can leave space to recognize something, but it doesn't condone it. You can leave space to recognize something, but it doesn't energetically condone it, if that makes sense. While for masculine and feminine energy right now coming into divine union frequency, that modality or that ability, if you will, of recognition has to do more with the fact of feeling the energetic safety of coming into the divine union frequency. And for feminine, again, that's that moment that feels very energetically difficult because this is not the feminine that, again, if this is feminine that has these insecurities, it's almost like the feminine giving masculine this bag and being like, this is a lot of bags of fears and insecurities I carry that you did not create. This is not your bag of messiness. I know, I need you to carry it for me. And this is the masculine saying, I don't take it energetically personally. I recognize that you need me to help me hold this. That you didn't necessarily create it, that it was caused because you experienced something, and now you have to carry it with you. And this is the masculine saying, I can do that. I can hold that. I don't take it energetically personally. And what happens in the moment that the feminine sees the ability of masculine being able to hold the bag for even other unhealed masculine experiences from the past, that's the feminine energy feeling even more of that feeling of energetic security in a masculine that's done that work, not feeling energetically triggered at that moment, but recognizing and understanding the circumstances for what they are. While for feminine, masculine energy, seeing a feminine that's almost able to articulate and say, I have these insecurities, not responding, not treating the masculine, like not assuming the masculine's coming towards them in that way. A feminine that's literally able to parse and say, I have to carry something within that I know that you did not create, leaving the opportunity of understanding that even though you are not that, like we must navigate these together. The masculine energy that sees the feminine that's able to articulate in that way doesn't presume the masculine is in that modality. That is what allows for that ability of coming into divine union, because that's that moment of energetic harmony. And again, both energies supporting each other and not navigating something in the way that they would, but understanding the context through which someone needs to carry something. While for masculine and feminine energy in separation right now, these are energies building bridges by articulating about these experiences in the past. And for a lot of the masculine energy, a lot of this connectivity point, whether this is an act of restoration or new energetic connections, is taking accountability for the past self. Especially if, again, there were spaces or places where masculine, you may have been more inclined in building a world of illusion around the feminine. This is taking accountability for what may have occurred in those spaces and places when you realize that you weren't moving towards the manifestation goals. Or if this was masculine energy that was too eager to follow their own energetic pursuits, instead of working with feminine. This is, again, a lot of masculine energy taking that energetic accountability to build that bridge, because that's the masculine saying, I can recognize and identify and hold regret for something I was doing wrong, and that is my affirmation on what I intend to do right moving forward. And that's either, again, feminine receiving that or experiencing that with new energetic connections from masculine, or coming into restorational paths with masculine that's able to articulate not just what they did wrong, but almost showing energetic evidence on what they are doing now to facilitate that type of healing and growth. Final card for today's spread between our Five of Swords in its reversal in combination with our King of Wands in its reversal. One card to clarify, please. Clarification coming through right now with our Four of Cups in its reversal. Masculine and feminine energy right now in separation. This is breaking out of cycles. This is new. These are new possibilities, new energetic cycles opening. Like I just keep saying, a lot of cycles were broken during that closing out of that process that we just experienced. And even now, that ability to take a different direction here, like it's allowing for something. And what's beautiful about it is for both masculine and feminine, bearing in mind this is not based on gender, but what it feels most aligned to. This is that modality that we are experiencing wherein, again, it's not that you're letting go of the past. It's not like you're turning a blind eye to the past. This is energy that is looking back to the past and they're building a bridge with it. They're looking back from the past and they're articulating, like, I want to tell you about something that I don't want to energetically go back to. And that ability to identify something, the ability to extract something of value from a past experience that is helping, build new pathwork going forward, is allowing for new possibilities of experience going forward. And that is, again, either masculine energy coming towards feminine with a state and space of saying, like, I am on my healing journey. I know I'm not energetically perfect. And this is almost masculine. Again, this is the armor off moment. And that's the feminine saying, I don't require you to be. Feminine energy almost saying to masculine in separation, I never asked for you to be perfect. None of us are energetically perfect. I just wanted you to be energetically mindful of those spaces and places in between. Because the minute the feminine sees a masculine that is energetically mindful of the self is the minute that the feminine feels energetically protected by the masculine, because that shows a feminine energy of a masculine who is mindful of the self, right? That has that care and consideration. While for masculine and feminine energy right now that is coming into divine union, that energetic equivalent to a certain extent, being able to identify and see that masculine, again, feeling the weight of almost energetically carrying wounds that weren't even placed there by you, but someone from the past. That is that moment that, again, not letting that trigger you, but almost carrying it the way that the feminine is asking you to. It leaves that possibility of, again, someday you're looking at something and saying, like, I'm going to hold this right now. But what is the masculine saying to themselves energetically to a certain extent? It's not required, but I hope one day to heal that. I hope one day to heal that. Because that's almost the masculine feeling the compassion of a weight of a feminine that's carrying wounds from a place or space that weren't hers to experience, but were kind of sign of like that moment of them kind of having to navigate that, right? While for masculine, feminine energy right now, seeing the masculine, like almost saying to the masculine, saying, I know you didn't put these wounds here, but I need you to carry them for me. And the masculine not getting reactive to that, not taking it energetically personal, but saying, I understand completely. And almost saying to the feminine, I hope one day to heal those. That's that feminine's also feeling that energetic possibility. But we see even now that this is a masculine also feels like they can heal something energetically with that feminine, because this is a feminine that's able to articulate upon these things with masculine, not subject them to them, right? Both of these energies doing work to feel energetically safe with the other. While for masculine and feminine energy right now, in the heart of the divine union frequency, this is that work of pushing those energetic boundaries, trying to effectively or energetically heal these things. And it's not easy, right? We saw that during that period of the eclipse, that idea of locationality, identifying and understanding the source of an energetic pain, is now allowing that deepening of pathwork in trying to navigate and create that sense of new energetic possibility by almost going to the heart of where some kind of wound was experienced and unpacking it, all for the sake of energetically healing it. That's hard work. That's very sensitive work. And even now it can feel like it's very triggering. But what are these energies doing? They're not pushing each other in that modality. They're taking more of that like slow pathwork of that wait and see approach, because that is the difference of, again, feeling like you're creating that sense of someone having to energetically change versus saying, I want what's energetically best for you. Bottom of the deck on this reading right now is we've got here, amazingly, our Nine of Swords in its reversal. You know, the thing about this type of work, listen, letting go of grief is also painful. We see even now, like a lot of this energy moving forward right now, there's almost this moment, some of these experiences have built forth to such an extent that there's pain here that someone's holding and saying, the only thing I have left to hold here is the pain of something, right? That can be very difficult, right? Because sometimes we realize that the reason we carry wounds forward is because we still miss something energetically so much that we would rather carry the pain of something than allow it to be that moment of energetic release. And so we see even now, like there's almost a moment that we're seeing across all of these frequencies that says in a way, like, if I don't have this pain, did it ever energetically happen, right? Like in a way, it's like that pain almost becomes that like totem to a certain extent, and being able to hold something that almost is that memory that something energetically occurred. So we see even now that there's a lot of this energy working through this process of grief, and the grief is actually releasing the grief. Because that's that moment of saying, like, if I let go of that pain, if I let go of that anger, if I let go of that fear, then I have to accept that something is energetically gone or something is energetically departed. So we see even now, like, that can be a very difficult process, because that's that moment that, like, even in the moment that you feel energetically better, it can almost hurt to a certain extent. But we kind of see across all of these, like, that is how we truly create closure. Because that's that moment that we recognize sometimes that, like, the reason we hold on to pain is because of the fear of feeling nothing, right? But we see even now, like, that's a lot of that path work that's almost allowing for that amplification of joy to come in to help remove that feeling of that vacancy, if you will, in terms of letting go of that energetic grief. That is our daily collective read for today. I'd like to thank you guys so much for being here and experiencing it with me. Just a reminder, if you would like to book a private reading with me, you can book one on my website, Strega.com. My private readings are done over video, and if you are a subscriber to my TikTok, you can take 10% off any of my services when you pay. Just mention your subscriber name at the point of payment. Please keep in mind, if you book a private reading with me, it is a two-step process. You have to book the reading, you have to pay for the reading. Please make sure you do both if you'd like to have that reading. Most importantly, please remember that I will never, ever, 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 ever reach out to you for a private reading. I will never DM you. I will never PM you. I will never slide into your inbox and tell you that I have a very important message that only I can deliver. The only way you can book a reading with me is if you book one on my website. So I encourage you to do it there. Also, I'd like to remind all of you, if you have not become aware, we are now offering tarot classes. Our first class that we did was last month, and it was based and focused on the Fool card. This month, we are moving forward and progressing on our journey with the Magician. Each month, we do a live class wherein we explore, deep dive into a particular card in the tarot. One thing I like about these classes is I fashion them to be perfect for both the absolute novice tarot reader as well as the seasoned reader. So there's a bit of something there for everyone. All you need to do to become a part of these classes is become a paid member to my Substack, graystrega.substack.com. Your paid membership to my Substack includes access to each month's live classes, as well as the recordings and coursework for all of the previous classes, as well as access to a free one-on-one chat with me and all of the other students, wherein you can ask any questions in relationality to tarot and your own personal journey. Also, if you choose to purchase a founding membership on my Substack, included in a discount to your full year's subscription will also be a free 1-hour mentorship reading with me, wherein we will review where you are on your own tarot journey, and I'll give you any insights into how to best utilize the classes to your best potential moving forward, and what you might want to focus and concentrate on to help improve and focus your studies. Again, thank you to everybody who's already joining us in those classes. That next class, if you care to join live, is going to be on Wednesday, May 15th at 6 p.m. PST, 9 p.m. Eastern, and I hope you'll join us there. Also, if you don't become a paid member to my Substack, I would encourage you to become a free member, because your free membership will also include access to just finding out anything that may be coming about in relationality to events, new courses, etc. I want to thank you guys so much for being here today and sharing with me in these messages, and as always, we will do this again tomorrow.